Okay, so imagine trying to add a whole new foundational level to a country's democracy, and not just with some small policy change, but by actually rewriting the constitution itself. Well, that's exactly what India did. Today, we're diving into the 73rd Amendment, a single piece of legislation that brought formal political power to hundreds of millions of people in the smallest villages. It's a huge story.
And this really gets to the heart of the matter. I mean, if you're a nation of over 1 billion people, how do you actually get power from the capital city all the way down to a tiny village? How do you make democracy a local reality? That is the core question we're going to tackle today.
To really understand just how massive this change was, we need to rewind a bit. Because before 1992, there was this huge piece missing from India's democratic puzzle. A real gap between the state governments and the people living their lives at the most local level. So the original constitution, it had a vision. Article 40 suggested that states should set up village councils, or panchayats. But here's the kicker. It was non-justiciable. Now, what does that mean? Well, think of it like friendly advice instead of a hard and fast rule. There was no constitutional requirement, which meant states could, and, often did, just ignore it. And this is where everything changed. The 1992 amendment wasn't just another new policy. It was a total constitutional game changer. It basically took the idea of local democracy out of the suggestion box and chiseled it into the very bedrock of the nation's law. It wasn't advice anymore. It was a mandate. And here's the crucial point. This wasn't just another law passed by Parliament. The amendment added an entirely new chapter, Part 9, to the Constitution itself. It officially created a third tier of government, giving formal constitutional status to these local bodies, known as Panchayati Raj institutions. So democracy was now being coded directly into the country's DNA, right down at the village level. So what does this actually look like on the ground? I mean, a constitutional guarantee is one thing, but you need a real architecture for power to flow through. So how exactly did the amendment go about building that structure? Well, the entire system rests on this single foundation, the Gram Sabha. And this is really direct democracy in its purest form. See, it's not a council of elected officials. It's a body made up of every single registered voter in the village. This makes it the only permanent unit in the whole system, the bedrock that everything else is built on top of. So, building on that foundation, the amendment set up a uniform three-tier system across the country. First, at the village level, you have the Gram Panchayat. Then, in the middle, there's an intermediate body, and at the top of this local structure, you have the Zila Parishad at the district level. It created this clear pyramid of governance, connecting every single village to the wider district. But this is where the amendment went from just being structural to being truly revolutionary. It didn't just create empty seats, it mandated who would fill them. The actual text of the law is so powerful, stating that not less than 1/3 of the total number of seats shall be reserved for women. This was a radical, legally binding commitment to bringing women into politics. And the policy of inclusion, it went even further than that. Beyond the 1/3 reservation for women, seats were also reserved for marginalized communities, the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. And it was done in direct proportion to their population in that area. The goal was simple, but wow, so profound, to make sure these councils were a true reflection of the communities they were supposed to serve. Okay, so we've got the structure, and we've got the people. But what are they actually empowered to do? What's their purpose? And, maybe most importantly, where does the money come from? Let's take a look at the powers and the purse. To define what these new councils could actually do, the amendment added something called the 11th Schedule to the Constitution. It's basically a list of 29 different subjects, and it covers everything from agriculture and water management to rural housing and sanitation. This wasn't just a small list of chores. It was this broad mandate that handed over responsibility for pretty much every aspect of rural life to local hands. And this really makes that list of 29 subjects much more tangible, right? We're talking about the absolute essentials, making sure people have clean drinking water, building local roads and bridges, managing schools, overseeing sanitation, and running poverty programs. These are the critical things that directly impact people's day-to-day lives. Of course, having all these responsibilities doesn't mean a thing if you don't have the money to back it up.
So, to prevent that, the amendment created a vital financial link. It mandates that every 5 years, each state has to form a finance commission, and their job is to act as an independent reviewer and recommend exactly how state funds, taxes, and grants should flow down to these local governments.
So this system has been in place for over 3 decades now. What has been the real-world impact of this massive democratic experiment? Let's look at the revolution it sparked, and of course the challenges that still remain. Just let that number sink in for a second. 2.8 million. That's how many people now hold formal elected positions in these local bodies. So many of them are women and people from marginalized communities who, for generations, were completely shut out from power. This is arguably the largest single mobilization of political representatives anywhere on the planet. But of course, the story isn't perfect. As you can see, there's a real balance of successes and challenges. On the one hand, power dynamics in villages have genuinely shifted, and millions now have a voice through regular elections. That's a huge win. But on the other hand, these local bodies are often still financially dependent on the state, and they can sometimes be dominated by local elites and bureaucracy.
But even with those challenges, the overall verdict is pretty clear. The positive impact is just undeniable. As one analysis puts it, the amendment has changed power equations significantly, and that has fundamentally altered rural India by bringing millions of people into the democratic fold for the very first time.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The constitutional architecture is there. The people are participating. So the big question for the future is this: what is the next great leap that's needed to take these institutions from just being functional to being truly powerful, autonomous drivers of their own local development?